side of things? Well, it's all related to weather, right? Ocean weather, I think is what you said.
Well, yeah, ocean weather, right? So, I mean, these waves coming from a series of storm systems. It's hard to pin down exactly which one made these waves. It may have been a combination of them. But really, they started like near the Aleutian Islands off of Alaska. So they've been traveling toward us, and we'll continue to see some more sets as storms continue to pound across the North Pacific. I wanted to mention, I didn't get to it in my first little weather forecast earlier, that high tide tomorrow morning is the other kind of like hot spot for this high surf, and when we'll see some impacts. That's going to be between around 4 and 5 a.m. And then the weather is going to contribute to that. We're going to talk about that in a moment. So here's a live look from Domenico's on the wharf tonight. We are seeing a little bit of foggy conditions. There's a lot of moisture in the air right now. You know, really, this kind of started a couple of days ago. We had a cold front just a couple of days ago that came in, stalled out, and pretty much dissipated. And, you know, we kind of stayed on the front side of that cold front, so technically in its warm sector, and we really haven't seen that change. So it's still kind of warm and muggy out there. I mean, we got into the 70s in Salinas and Watsonville today, so some very warm temperatures. Even Monterey was in the upper 60s, and it was muggy. On top of that, it was very hazy today. When we have big waves breaking like this, you get all of this seawater essentially that gets aerosolized. So you're getting salt in the atmosphere, you're getting water and additional water and other maybe biologics that kind of get pushed into the air. So it makes it actually kind of hazy. I've been looking at some of like the maybe backyard air quality monitoring stations right along the coast, and it's funny that right along the coast we have some lessened air quality, whereas most other areas are like this, basically just good to moderate. But right along the coast where these waves are breaking, these air quality monitors are picking up this particulate, and oftentimes this is salt, and it's in the air. It's kind of hazy out there because of that. On top of that, there's a lot of moisture, so patchy fog is going to be a problem into tomorrow morning. But tomorrow morning we have a weather system on the way, and again, I mentioned, let me just quickly look at some of those temperatures out there. It's pretty mild, upper 50s for most cities around the bay, and even a few spots close to 60 at this late hour. So let's take a look at what is going on out there. Here's a look at our storm tracker. Quite a bit of cloud cover passing through, and then some radar echoes starting to approach. Obviously, you have to go all the way up to, say, Mendocino County, maybe at least Sonoma County, to see some precipitation reaching the coast as this cold front. And really up there is kind of this atmospheric river that they're experiencing in Northern California and Oregon. By the time it gets down here, it'll really just be a fast-moving cold front. There's a little spin you can detect. I know there's an obvious spin up here. That's a good storm. But there's a weaker spin here, another little low coming around the bigger low, which is going to push the cold front through tomorrow early in the morning. And it'll come through fairly rapidly, which is good news because lingering cold fronts and atmospheric rivers tend to cause flooding. And that's not going to be the case with this system. So let's talk about timing. So this is 3 a.m. We start to see a few, forerunning showers arrive around the Monterey Bay region, mostly light stuff. As the cold front comes through, it should have somewhat of a narrow cold frontal rain band. It should be around 5 a.m. or so when this happens, and we'll see brief moderate to heavy rain and some gusty winds as this comes through. You might get just a brief break before the larger expanse of the cold front arrives, of the frontal system anyway. So at 7 a.m. we see the bay pretty much filled in, and we have a few heavy showers moving south into the Salinas Valley. So the back edge of this is going to come through pretty quickly. So by 9 a.m. it looks like we're almost done in Santa Cruz, and maybe even by the Monterey Peninsula at that time, whereas most areas in the south are getting moderate rains at this point in time. And by lunchtime, it has pretty much moved out of the region. So front coming through pretty quickly tomorrow morning. Behind it, in the post-frontal environment, there will be some instability, so we'll see some puffy clouds, some showers, and ultimately there's a chance of a thunderstorm. Actually, there's a chance of a thunderstorm with frontal passage, so when the cold front comes through, but also behind it. Latest model trends are kind of backing away from that, but there's still a chance of a few showers and maybe an isolated thunderstorm tomorrow afternoon. That should come to an end with sunset tomorrow night, and we'll have a kind of cool and drier air mass work its way in. Total precip with this system still looking pretty light, even with the potential for brief heavy rainfall. Ultimately, totals aren't going to be all that high, maybe a half an inch for cities around the bay, maybe a bit higher in those coastal mountains. Let's quickly talk about the wind. That's the other factor here. We're not expecting winds to be extreme like we had on last Saturday, but they will pick up a little bit and get quite gusty. So this is midnight. We see some of these higher wind values just offshore. We can see the green indicating 20 miles per hour. And then that gets a little bit higher as we head toward 3 a.m. And then by 5 a.m., as this frontal boundary works its way through, something interesting happens. So I mentioned a little while ago that tomorrow morning around 4 or 5 a.m. is when we're going to see our high tide. So we're still going to have some very high surf. We're going to have high tide, and then we'll have southerly winds coming up in the bay also pushing a little bit harder on that water into places like the Santa Cruz Harbor, into Soquel Creek, Capitola, into Soquel Cove, places like that. So there might be some minor storm surge on top of the already high surf and high tide, which could perhaps make coastal flooding a little more likely. So that is going to be a trouble spot tomorrow afternoon. I think we have a reporter who's going to be keeping an eye on that tomorrow. Winds will rapidly shift to the northwest behind the front as it passes through. Could still be gusty at times into late tomorrow morning as it passes through. I think we'll get a little lull late tomorrow morning before the drier, colder northwesterly flow kicks in, and that's how we'll spend the rest of our day tomorrow. And that will be how we prime the air mass into Christmas Day. Quick look at your temperature forecast tomorrow. We're going to be in the 50s across Santa Cruz County. Chilly for this time of year, maybe just a little bit below normal. Farther south and east you go, you might see a few low 60s, but that's about it. It's still looking pretty cool out there, at least seasonable tomorrow compared to all the warmer temperatures we've had recently on the peninsula, upper 50s to low 60s, and then down south also some 50s to low 60s. 7-day forecast showing that as we head into Christmas Day or Wednesday, we have dry conditions. The winds will still be there, but maybe more out of the northwest, and no rain expected. Beyond that, Thursday through Sunday, several weak systems will kind of move through. None of them really sticking out at the moment. Nothing looking strong, but several chances of rain during that period. It's not going to rain all day long or all the way during that period, but we'll kind of have some on and off showers. Temperatures will be more seasonable as well. Inland areas also dry on Christmas Day and the first night of Hanukkah as well. Looking cool, but dry. And then beyond that, more showers to track and perhaps some more high surf. We'll be keeping an eye on that as well. Victor.
All righty. Thanks so much, Dan.